Officially, the North Spire Loop has been closed for maintenance for 3 years. The sign is simple: trail closed, danger, do not enter. None of the rangers will look you in the eyes when you ask why. They'll mumble something about unstable rocks, washouts, liability. One of them will probably mention bear activity because bears is an easy word. Everybody understands bears. What they won't tell you is that on the last weekend that trail was open, 5 hikers went in, and only 1 came out. They weren't idiots, and that's important to know. This isn't a story about drunk teenagers breaking into an abandoned asylum. These were normal people, the kind of people you probably have on your Instagram feed. There was Mia, 27, the planner, the one with laminated trail map, backup power bank, and emergency whistle, already tested in the parking lot. Logan, her boyfriend, Jim Strong, but new to real mountains. He was mostly there to take photos of Mia standing on cliffs. Also Jules, Mia's best friend, quiet, sarcastic, and just outdoorsy enough to pretend she wasn't anxious about every rustle in the underbrush. Also Dev, the guy with the camera. There's always one. He had a new action cam strapped to his chest, already imagining the edit. Drone shot, cut to laughing faces, then a beat drop over a slow pan of sunset on the ridge. And Aaron, Mia's cousin, ex-military, now back in school, the one everyone half-secretly assumed would be the responsible one if things went sideways. They arrived late in the afternoon, gravel crunching under worn tires, helped themselves to a spot near the trailhead, and stepped out into that high country air that somehow makes you feel like your lungs are brand new. At first, it was just another weekend adventure. On the bulletin board at the trailhead, under the usual sun-faded posters, "Leave no trace, know before you go, bear safety," someone had thumbtacked a new sheet of paper. Not official, no logo, just bold marker on printer paper. "Do not camp above the tree line. They move in the open." Jules pointed at it, eyebrows up. Okay, that's creepy. Mia laughed, unbothered. Probably some weirdo's idea of a joke. Logan took a picture of it. "I'm tagging this local cryptid warning." Dev panned his camera over it, chuckling. "Cold open for the vlog. I love it." Only Aaron seemed unsettled. He studied the handwriting, the tremor in the letters where the marker had pressed too hard. Not artfully messy. Desperate messy. But he shrugged it off when Mia asked, "You good?" "Yeah," he said. "Just thinking about the weather." He pointed to the clouds stacking up like dirty cotton along the spine of the range. "Don't want to get caught in a storm." They signed the trail register, just names on a clipboard, like signing in at the gym, and started up the trail. You know how it is at the beginning of a hike. The trail feels like a promise. Everyone's still joking, backpacks feel light, and nobody's thinking about how far they have to come back. That's the thing about trails. They never look dangerous at the start. The North Spire Trail climbed steadily through dense fir and pine, the forest dipping alternatively into golden light and sudden pockets of cool shadow. Birds chattered above them. Somewhere far off, water shrugged over rocks. An hour in, Logan called out, "Guys, check this out." He stepped off the main path into a patch of exposed soil where the ground sloped down to a dry creek bed. There, sunk into the earth, was a depression nearly as wide as Logan was tall. It looked like a crater. The edges crumbled and collapsed where he prodded with his boot. Mia frowned. "Is that from a falling tree?" "No trunk," Aaron said, scanning the woods. Dev crouched, filming, running one hand over the footprint shape. "Okay, I know this is dumb, but it kinda looks like toes?" He wasn't wrong. The front end of the crater had 5 rounded protrusions, each as big as a duffel bag. Not sharp, no claw marks, just blunt impressions, as if something enormous and soft had pressed down. Jules shivered. "Can we not? My brain is already imagining a titan stomping through here." "Relax," Mia said, though she was measuring the depression with her eyes. "It's just erosion. Maybe a sinkhole collapsed weird." "Giants?" Logan said, grinning for the camera. "Confirmed." Dev grinned back. "Hit like and subscribe for more cursed hikes." They moved on. The forest closed around them again, swallowing the strange mark. That's another thing about trails. If you keep walking forward, the weirdness behind you can feel like it never happened. At least until the next one. By early evening, they broke out above the tree line. The world suddenly opened. No more close-knit trunks or safety of branches. Just bare rock, a low scrub clinging in cracks, and the wide sweep of sky pouring light over jagged peaks. "Whoa," Logan breathed, putting his hands on his hips, chest heaving. Okay, this was worth it. Dev turned in a slow circle, camera catching it all. "This is insane." They could see the North Spire itself now, a crooked fang of stone knifing up from the ridge, catching the last gold of the sun. "Camp just below that?" Mia suggested. "So we can hit the summit at sunrise?" Aaron squinted at the clouds. They'd thickened, dragging purple shadows across the valley. The air had a dry, metallic smell, like static waiting for a spark. "We should stay lower," he said. "Storm's building." Mia hesitated. The view up here was everything she'd wanted. The photos, the stories, the feeling of being high above the world like the people in the travel blogs she followed. "We'll be fine," she said. "If it looks worse, we'll come down." They found a flat stretch of rock near a jumble of boulders, just enough scrub to anchor their tents. By the time they had their little nylon homes pitched, the sun was sliding behind the far peaks, smearing red and orange along the serrated horizon. And that's when the ground moved. Very softly at first, a low, almost inaudible tremor that made Jules look up from her stove in confusion. "Did you feel that?" "Earthquake?" Dev said. Aaron knelt down, palm pressed to the rock. The vibration thudded up through his arm like a distant drumbeat. Boom, boom, boom. Too slow, too spaced out for a quake. It felt intentional, like footsteps, far away but heavy as sin. "Probably just rockfall," Logan said, but his voice had lost some of its easy swagger. "Rockfall doesn't happen in beats," Jules murmured. The tremors faded after a minute, sliding back into stillness. The ridge was silent again, save for the whisper of wind. Mia forced a smile. "Okay, that was weird, but everything up here is weird, right? We're at like..." She checked her GPS watch. 9,000 feet. The mountain's just doing mountain things. Nobody wanted to argue hard enough to be the one who ruined the night, so they let it go. They cooked freeze-dried meals. Dev filmed a shaky camp update, where Logan flexed to show he wasn't cold and Jules made faces behind him. The stars came out, fierce and close, the Milky Way a white scar across the sky. And while they laughed and ate, something stood very still among the dark shapes of the far peaks and watched the tiny dots of their headlamps move around. It was Aaron who woke first. No noise startled him, no nightmare. Just that old military instinct that something was off. The night outside the tent was strange. Too bright and too dark at the same time. The moon had risen, swollen and yellow, laying a dark sheet of light over the ridge. The wind had died completely. No rustle, no sigh, as if the world had taken a breath and refused to let it out. He crawled out of the tent and stood, listening. Boom. He felt it more than he heard it. A thud somewhere deep underfoot. Boom. The second one was closer. Rocks clicked against each other, a pebble skittering down a slope. Aaron? Mia's voice came out sleepily from the tent. You okay? He debated lying, choosing the easy answer. Yeah, just gotta use the bathroom. Romantic, Jules mumbled from her tent. He grabbed his headlamp anyway and walked away a bit. Not because he needed to, but because being inside thin nylon when the world felt wrong made his skin crawl. He angled the beam away from the camp, over the ridge. At first, he thought he was looking at a shadow. On the face of the opposite slope where the moonlight painted everything in shades of bone and charcoal, there was a shape darker than the rest. Fingers, his brain supplied, before he could stop it. 4 long blotches, each as wide as a car, arcing together in the suggestion of a curve. His light trembled, the beam shaking as he moved. The dark wasn't just darker, it was deeper. A hollow pressed into the mountain itself, as if something enormous had rested its hand there, fingers curled up over the ridge. The palm of the depression was the size of a small house. Aaron's mouth went dry. He turned, swallowing hard. Guys, you might want to see this. There was grumbling from the tents, but one by one they emerged, wrapped in jackets, faces crumpled with sleep. He didn't say anything. He just pointed. As their beams followed his, the mood shifted. No more joking. No easy, wow, that's wild. Jules gave a soft, involuntary whimper. Dev whispered, That's not erosion. Logan swallowed audibly. It's some kind of geological formation. Has to be. Mia just stared. Her brain was trying to catalog it, categorize it, file it away as known phenomenon. It refused. The scale was wrong. The shape was wrong. It was too deliberate. The ground shivered again. A slow, pulsing tremor. Boom. This time it came from behind them. All 4 headlamps snapped around. Up in the skyline toward the jagged silhouette of the north spire, something was moving. Not fast, not dramatic, just rising. At first it looked like another ridge shifting against the stars, rock sliding off rock. Then their eyes adjusted, and the shape defined itself. A shoulder rounding out of the mountain's line, a slope of something that might have been a skull. No face they could see, just absence, black against the sky, swallowing starlight. It was enormous. Not big like a truck, big like a piece of the world that had decided to stand up. The sound of stone grinding on stone rolled down the slope like distant thunder. Inside now, Aaron snapped, every nerve in his body turning to ice. He didn't have time to say it twice. They dove for the tents, but instinct kicked in for all of them at once. Tents were thin. Tents were bright. Tents were bad. Screw it, Mia hissed. Grab your boots and get to the rocks. They yanked on footwear with shaking hands and grabbed whatever was closest. Headlamps, Dev's camera still strapped to his chest, Mia's pack, and sprinted for the jumble of half-buried boulders upslope from their camp. Behind them, the boom of those impossible steps grew louder. Boom, boom, boom. It felt like being inside a drum. The rock under their palms vibrated as they scrambled between 2 wedged boulders into a narrow crevice, hearts hammering up into their throats. "Lights," Aaron whispered sharply. "Off, now." The world snapped into near darkness, only the dim smear of the moon above slicing the crevice in silver. They huddled there, pressed together, breathing through open mouths, trying not to wheeze. And then the giant reached the ridge. They heard it first, the slow drag of something massive over stone, the crack and tumble of loosened rocks bouncing downhill. Then a shadow fell over their hiding spot, a darkness deeper than any cloud. The strip of moon above them vanished, replaced by a flat nothing. Dev made a small choking sound. Aaron clamped a hand over his mouth. Something lowered itself near the boulders, the air pressure changing, making their ears pop. The smell hit them next, dry, ancient, like dust from a tomb in cold iron. Through a crack in the rock near their knees, Mia could see a sliver of the ridge. A line of flesh? Stone? It was impossible to tell. The surface was rough like weathered rock, but it moved with the subtle, terrible inertia of something alive. A curve that might have been a wrist, the back of a hand settling on the ground nearby. Fingers as thick as tree trunks splaying out. The whole mountain seemed to sigh under its weight. The giant stopped. The silence that followed was not empty. It was listening. They felt it in their bones, that sense of being measured. Not seen exactly. The thing's head was still higher than their hiding place, but felt. Their tiny heat, their tiny heartbeats, intrusions crawling in on its realm. A finger shifted, dragging along the ground with a noise like distant avalanches. The tip of it passed within a few feet of their crevice, blocking the crack completely for a heartbeat. Jules's teeth chattered slightly against her lip. She squeezed her eyes shut and tried not to imagine the same finger curling inward, pinching the rocks together. The finger moved on. A few seconds later, the hand lifted, pebbles rattling down on them in little cascades. The pressure lightened as the shadow drew back. Boom. The next step was further away. Boom. Another heading down the slope. The giant was moving past them, out onto the open ridge where the little cluster of tents glowed faintly under the moon like bright mushrooms. Mia, against all her survival instincts, angled herself just enough to see through another crack. The giant leaned down. The angle of it made no sense. Her brain kept insisting she was watching bad special effects, that nothing that big could move like that without collapsing under its own weight. But there it was, a suggestion of a head turning, a neck that might have been a column of stacked boulders. No eyes that she could make out, but it looked. The tents shook as the creature's shadow rolled over them. It reached down. There was no roar, no dramatic stomp. It simply pinched the nearest tent between two fingers and lifted. The nylon crumpled and split like tissue. The sleeping bag inside dangled for a moment before sliding out, flopping limply hundreds of feet to smash on the rocks below. Logan's sleeping bag. Mia's breath shattered in her chest. She didn't hear herself say his name in a broken, airless whisper, but the others did. The giant held the ragged scrap of a tent up near where its face should be, as if sniffing it, then tossed it aside casually. The wreckage fluttered away into the darkness like shed skin. It moved to the next. In under 30 seconds, their entire camp was gone. Tents crushed, gear scattered, the careful little arrangement of their little human life obliterated by fingers the size of pillars. The giant seemed almost puzzled by the findings, turning them over, pinching them, letting them drop. Finally, apparently satisfied that nothing in the cluster was worth keeping, it straightened. Mia felt the air shift as its attention drifted away. The shadows slipped off their crevice as it turned toward the far edge of the ridge. 3 more thunderous steps, and it vanished back into the broken line of peaks, dissolving into jagged silhouettes in darkness, as if it had never been separate from the mountain at all. Only then did anyone breathe out properly. They stayed frozen for a long, long time. Eventually, Aaron forced himself to speak. "We have to move. There might be more." "Logan," Mia croaked. Her voice cracked open something. Grief, shock, panic. It all crashed over them at once. "Mia," Aaron said as gently as he could in a whisper. "He wasn't in the tent. He was with us when we ran, remember? He stopped. They all did the same mental roll call. Mia, Aaron, Jules, Dev. No, Logan. He was behind me," Dev said, his voice rising. "When we ran, I swear he was right behind me." Jules shook her head, tears glinting in the silver of moonlight. "I thought he was already here. I didn't count." They hadn't. Nobody had. In that mad scramble, they just assumed everyone had made it. Aaron's jaw clenched. "We can't help him from here. First priority is getting off this ridge alive, or we're all just more bodies they'll find later. Understood?" It was brutal. It was cold. It was the only thing keeping him from breaking. They eased out of the crevice, limbs stiff, hearts still pounding. The camp was a flattened mess. Their tents were shredded plastic and twisted poles. Sleeping bags burst open like gutted animals, synthetic fill drifting in the air. Logan's pack lay crushed under a rock the size of a car, one strap sticking out. Mia moved toward it on autopilot, but Aaron caught her arm. "Don't," he said. "It's too exposed up here. We're going back down to the tree line. We'll circle back lower, call for help as soon as we have a signal." Dev tapped his phone. No bars. No surprise. "The main trail?" Jules asked. Aaron shook his head. "You saw those steps. Whatever that thing is, it's walking the open ridge. We drop down the side, cut across the valley, pick up the main path lower down." "That's not on the map," Mia said, even as she shouldered her half-crushed pack anyway. Her brain clung to labeled lines on paper. Stepping off of them felt like stepping into nowhere. "Neither are giants," Aaron said. "Stay close. No lights unless absolutely necessary. If you hear or feel anything, stop. Do not run unless I say so. Got it?" They nodded. The descent began. Moving down a steep, rocky slope in the dark is a special kind of hell. Loose stones skittered underfoot, threatening to send them tumbling. Scrub tore at their legs. Every gust of icy air felt like the cold breath of something enormous leaning close. They picked their way back down, half sliding, half crab walking, fingers numb where they clutched the rock. After 20 minutes that felt like hours, a line of twisted, wind-stunted pines appeared below them, black against the rock like skeletal fingers reaching up. "Thank God," Jules whispered. "Cover." They plunged into the sparse forest, grateful for the way the branches broke up the sky, making them feel smaller, less visible, less edible. The tremors started again. Boom. 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 Not as close as before, but not far enough for comfort. Somewhere above them, another, or the same, giant was patrolling the ridge. "Keep going," Aaron murmured. "We want distance, not height." They moved faster now, stumbling through undergrowth. Branches whipped their faces. Needles scraped their arms. Dev, still wearing the chest-mounted camera, caught glimpses of their wild-eyed faces in the bouncing reflections of his own headlamp on rock. though the headlamp itself stayed off. Little shards of terrified humanity in the middle of a nightmare. "Guys," he whispered hoarsely after a while, "I think we're angling too far north. The main trail runs south along the..." A sound cut him off. Not a boom this time. Something much closer. A grinding creak like trees protesting in high wind. Except there was no wind. They slowed. The forest around them groaned again, a deep, resonant noise. Mia lifted her eyes, heart slamming against her ribs. At first, she thought she was looking at two closely spaced tree trunks ahead, parallel to each other, thick, pale in the moonlight filtering through the canopy. Then, one of them shifted. It wasn't trees. They were standing between legs. The realization hit them all at once, a sickening lurch in the stomach. They had walked directly between the ankles of something that was standing perfectly still, its upper half hidden in the canopy of darkness. "Don't move," Aaron breathed. Every muscle in Mia's body screamed to run, but she froze, teeth chattering as she stared at the vast, rough column of whatever it was beside her. It was like standing next to a stone monolith that was pretending to be a statue and failing. The leg flexed just slightly. Bits of bark and rock flaked off, pattering to the ground around their feet. Above them, leaves shivered in a gust of air from something exhaling. The giant hadn't noticed them. Not yet. It was waiting, listening like the first one had. And then, off to their left, far enough they couldn't see the source, but close enough that the sound knifed through the trees very clearly, something screamed. Human, male, raw with terror. The scream cut off with a crunch that vibrated through the trunks around them. Mia's vision tunneled. Logan. The giant turned toward the sound. They felt the motion before they saw it. The leg beside them shifted, lifting. It was stepping away. As the titanic foot swept forward, the ground rolled under them like a wave. Mia dropped to her knees. Dev slammed into a tree. Jules bit down on a cry as a branch whipped her face. The giant took another step, trees cracking under its weight like matchsticks. The canopy above them tore and swayed. The thing moved toward where the scream had come from. Aaron didn't wait. "Go," he hissed. "Now back the way we came, quiet as you can." They scurried in the opposite direction of the giant's strides, using the moments of its distraction like soldiers crossing a battlefield during shell fire. Behind them, a deep, wet crunch sounded again. Then silence. No more screams. They made it maybe 6 minutes. 6 minutes of stumbling, whispering, hyperventilating, following Aaron's silhouette as he had led them down slope. 6 minutes of boom, boom, of the giant's movement receding behind them. Then, everything went wrong at once. The ground dropped away unexpectedly into a steep ravine, a dry gash in the hillside. Mia, leading now, stepped into empty air and went down hard, sliding on her side in a shower of dirt and rock. She landed in a shallow trench, breath knocked out of her, ankles screaming. Above her, Dev's silhouette appeared, reaching down. I'm okay, she gasped, grabbing at his hand. And then her phone, jolted loose from her pocket, tumbled out beside her. The screen lit up as it hit the ground, bright as a flare in the dark. For half a second, the ravine glowed cold blue-white. The mountain answered. Boom. Not the distant patrol steps now. A new impact, much closer. It wasn't just through the ground. It was in their chests, in their teeth. Jules whispered a wordless curse. Aaron snapped. Phone! Mia scrambled, slapping at the device, but it was already too late. The giant had seen. The next step was close enough that chunks of rock dislodged from the ravine walls. "Run!" Aaron shouted, abandoning the pretense of silence. They bolted along the bottom of the ravine, scrambling over boulders, splashing through a trickle of snowmelt that had no business being as cold as it was. The footsteps followed, faster now. They weren't distant, ponderous booms anymore. They were rapid, hungry impacts. Boom, boom, boom. The ravine curved. They followed it blindly. At one bend, part of the wall had collapsed, forming a rough ramp up to the forest. Aaron veered toward it. They clawed their way up the slope, boots skidding, fingers digging into loose soil. Behind them, the ravine floor exploded in a spray of rock and dirt as something slammed into it. A foot, chopping down like a falling boulder. Mia felt the impact in her bones. She saw, in a sick flash, how easily that same foot could turn them into red smears on the hillside. She didn't look back. They burst out into the trees again, lunging between trunks, branches tearing at their clothes. The sounds behind them were chaos now, splintering wood, breaking rock, that horrible sense of something impossibly big forcing itself through a world built for smaller things. The forest thinned. Suddenly, they were spilling out onto a wide, bare slope of scree, loose rocks and gravel sliding downward in unstable sheets. A shadow fell over them. Mia risked a glance back. The giant was half out of the tree line, one leg planted in the ravine they'd just escaped, the other braced on the hillside. Up close, framed against the stars, its scale shattered her sense of reality. Each limb was like a column of interlocking stone, but the way it moved was wrong. Too fluid for rock, too heavy for flesh. It had no clear face, just irregular planes of darkness where features might be, like a statue that had been left unfinished for 1,000 years. Somewhere in that craggy mess, something watched them. It lifted its foot. Aaron shouted, voice splintering with more fear than command this time. "Scatter!" They did. Mia veered left, Jules right. Dev and Aaron straight downhill. The rocks underfoot rolled and clattered, making every step a near fall. The giant stepped down where they'd been. The impact was like a bomb. A wave of loose rock avalanched outward, knocking all of them off their balance. Mia went down hard, sliding, the scree acting like a ball bearing under her body. Dust choked her nose and mouth. She heard someone scream. Dev? Jules? She couldn't tell. The giant took another step, the foot slicing sideways across the slope this time. Not stomping, sweeping, like a child dragging a hand through a sandbox to clear a pattern. Mia saw it coming, the vast wall of rock flesh and pulverizing stone scything towards her. There was nowhere to go. At the last second, she shoved herself sideways, rolling into a shallow depression just as the foot crashed over the spot she'd been. The shock of it sent a spray of gravel over her, burying her legs. Above, someone's voice rose in a strangled cry that cut off mid-breath. When the dust thinned, there was only 3 of them still moving. Dev lay twisted 30 feet down slope, half buried under a fan of rocks, his chest-mounted camera blinking a single red light. Jules was on her hands and knees farther down, coughing, blood streaking one cheek. Aaron was closer, dragging himself upright, one arm hanging limp. Dev didn't move. Mia screamed for him, and then the giant bent down. Its hand descended with horrifying precision, fingers curling around Dev's body in a bunch of sliding scree. It lifted him, limp as a doll, up toward that vague notion of a face. For a heartbeat, Dev's eyes opened. He wasn't looking at the giant. He was looking down at them, the red camera light reflecting in his pupils like some kind of recording demon. Then the hand closed. The sound was wet and short and mercifully drowned out by the roar of shifting stones. The giant tossed what was left of him aside like trash. Jules sobbed. Aaron grabbed her, yanking her toward a line of jagged outcrops protruding from the slope. "Shelter," he gasped. "Now." They dove behind the rocks as the giant's other foot came down again, this time farther uphill, trying to herd them. The pattern was obvious now. Not random stomping, but deliberate herding, like a cat playing with mice, pinning them against terrain they couldn't cross. Ahead of them, the slope dropped abruptly into darkness, some kind of cliff or cut they couldn't see the bottom of. The giant took another step, closing the distance. There was nowhere else to go. Mia pressed her back to the cold stone, chest heaving. Jules was hiccuping sobs, clutching her side. Aaron's eyes darted around, searching for anything, any resource. "Flare," he muttered. "Tell me someone still has a flare." Mia's brain stumbled through the inventory of her pack. "Side pocket," she whispered. "Orange tube, 2 of them." He grabbed it, fingers shaking but deft. His thumb flicked the cap off. The flare hissed as it sparked to life, vomiting red fire and thick white smoke. The giant hesitated. It was too close now, towering over him at the edge of the outcrop. One more step and its foot would simply grind their hiding place into rubble. Aaron stepped out from behind the rocks. For a second, he was just a tiny, defiant shape against an impossible silhouette. He held the flare high. The red light splashed over the giant's lower half, painting the rough surface of its skin in flickering blood color. The heat of the flare seared Aaron's hand, but he didn't drop it. "Hey!" he screamed, voice cracking. "Over here!" The giant turned its not face toward him. The air tasted like copper and old stone. The flare smoke curled upward, seeping into rocks and crevices on the giant's form. Something in it responded. The giant recoiled. Not much, not dramatically, but enough that the foot it had been about to plant shifted backward instead. Aaron saw it. "You don't like that, do you?" he shouted, hysterical laughter bubbling under the words. "Yeah, I didn't like being stepped on either." He ran sideways along the outcrop, away from me and Jules, waving the flare like a madman dragging a comet tail of sparks. The giant followed him. Every step it took was still a threat. Rocks shattered, trees uprooted further down. But its orientation had changed. It was focused on the moving, burning thing, tracking it with slow, terrible pivots. "Aaron!" Mia screamed. "Come back!" He didn't. He couldn't. If he brought that thing back toward them, all of this would be pointless. He vaulted a split in the rock, dropping down onto a lower shelf that stuck out over the dark void below. The drop beneath him was a black maw, maybe 100 feet, maybe more. It didn't matter. The giant loomed over him, one hand lifting, fingers spreading. Aaron looked back over his shoulder, and for a split second locked eyes with Mia. "Get low," he shouted, "and when this goes, run." He turned back to the abyss, raised the flare to his mouth, and took a breath like he was about to dive. Then he hurled it down, out into the dark void below the shelf. The flare traced a blazing arc through the air, shedding sparks. For a moment, the blackness beneath them lit up in pulses. Jagged rock walls, twisted roots, the shadowed suggestion of some old, half-collapsed mine entrance yawning in the cliff face. The flare landed somewhere out of sight and exploded into brighter flame, igniting something dry and old and ready to burn. The world below them bloomed red. Heat rushed upward, a sudden dragon's breath. A column of fire surged up like a living thing, licking the underside of the outcrop. The giant screamed. Not with a mouth, not with sound exactly. The noise was like stone cracking in reverse, like fault lines being torn open. a grinding roar that made Mia's teeth ache. Its lower half, exposed to the blast of heat, reacted horribly. The stone flesh blistered, cracked spider webs up its legs, glowing from within with a dull orange light, as if something inside had been hiding from flame for a very long time and was now being dragged back into it. The giant stumbled. Its foot slipped on the heated scree. One enormous hand shot out, clawing at the cliff face for balance. The rock gave way under its weight. For the first time, Mia saw it fail. The giant toppled sideways, its body striking the slope with force that sent a wave of rock and fire outward. Its head, if that's what it was, caught the edge of the outcrop and shattered, spraying boulders and chunks of debris everywhere. It fell into the burning ravine below, its form cracking and collapsing, dissolving into a cascade of flaming rubble. The scream tapered off into 1,000 little pops and hisses as the rain of molten fragments hit the fire and scattered. What had been a living, impossible thing a moment ago was now just an avalanche on fire. The shockwave slammed into the outcrop, knocking Mia and Jules off their feet. A blast of heat and ash rolled over them, searing exposed skin. When the world steadied, Mia coughed, her eyes streaming, and looked around for Aaron. He was gone. The shelf where he'd stood was cracked and half missing, the edge burned to black. Whatever had happened in those last seconds, whatever last step he'd taken or been forced into, he was now somewhere down there in the inferno with the giant. Jules crawled to Mia, sobbing. "We have to go," she choked. "Mia, we have to go now before that fire comes up here." Because it was. The blaze was climbing, licking its way up cracks, catching dry brush. Sparks flew into the forest above. Mia wanted to stay, to scream, to jump, to not leave yet another person behind. But Aaron had given her a very specific order with his last breath. "When this goes, run." She grabbed Jules' wrist and they ran. By the time dawn lightened the sky over the peaks, the North Spire was wreathed in smoke. Fire crews saw the plume from miles away. Rangers scrambled, radios crackling. The trail closed sign became more than just an excuse for paperwork. It was now a line between chaos and control. They found her 6 hours later. A helicopter spotted movement near the lower section of the main trail. A figure staggering along the switchbacks, clothes shredded, skin covered in soot. When they landed and ran toward her, Mia didn't even try to run anymore. She just sank to her knees. Her voice was gone, scraped raw by smoke and screams. They had to lift her into the helicopter, fingers gentle around bruises she didn't remember getting. Later in the hospital, she told them what happened. At least, she tried. She talked about tremors, about footprints bigger than cars, about a handprint pressed into the side of a mountain like a child's palm in wet cement. She talked about something standing up from the ridge itself. The doctors called it trauma-induced hallucinations amplified by altitude, exhaustion, and shock. They circled possible psychosis on the clipboard. The ranger who took her statement wrote, "Believes in large unknown predator," and underlined the word believes. They logged Mia and her friends as victims of a catastrophic rock slide and subsequent wildfire. 5 went in, 1 came out. That was the story. The unofficial version, the one the rescue teams murmured to each other when the supervisors weren't listening, was a little different, because some of them had seen the handprint too. On the southern face of the ridge where the fire had burned hottest, the rock was freshly cracked and blackened. Trees were gone, soil was peeled back as if by huge scoops. And there, half revealed in the exposed cliff, were shapes. Not fossils, not clearly. But if you stood at the right angle, ignoring the optical illusions of shadow and heat distortion, you could swear you were looking at a fractured skull the size of a cabin, one empty socket glowing faintly with ember light. Beside it, like the last frame of a paused film, a hand was pressed deep into the stone. Each finger as long as a bus, the palm a crater. One ranger, a rookie who made the mistake of saying what everyone else was trying not to think, whispered, "Giants." The others shushed him quickly, eyes flickering to where the incident commander was talking to reporters. "Landslide," one veteran muttered. "Say landslide until you believe it. You want this place to stay open? You want people coming back?" The trail stayed closed. They put up the sign, "Maintenance, danger, do not enter." And at night, when they sat around their own fires, away from recording devices and liability clauses, they mentioned other things. Like how the tremors had continued for a while after the fire was out, fainter, farther away, as if something had been moving deeper into the range, something that had learned, painfully, that fire hurt. Up at the old trailhead, the unofficial warning is still there. Different paper, different marker. People keep replacing it when the wind rips it away. Do not camp above the tree line. They move in the open. Maybe it's a joke now, an in-joke with the locals, a way to spook tourists. Or maybe it's what passes for mercy. Up in the high country, storms still roll in. The mountains still crumble and heal. The fire scar on the North Spire Ridge is fading, scabbed over with new growth. But sometimes from the valley floor, people swear they see things on the skyline. Not always. Not often. Just once in a while when the clouds are moving strange and the light hits just wrong. The mountains look less like rock and more like knees, shoulders, hunchbacks. Like something large is standing very, very still, waiting for the small things below to forget. So, if you ever find yourself up near the range, any range really, and you feel a tremor under your feet that doesn't quite match the wind, and you see a footprint that's too big to laugh off, don't be brave. Don't go just a little higher for the view. Stay in the trees. Stay small. And whatever you do, don't camp where the mountains can see you move. Thanks for walking the ridge with me tonight. If you made it out in one piece, hit that like button and subscribe to Midnight Delight. And come back for more stories that should have stayed buried in the dark. Sleep light and stay out of the open.